So Hulk Hogan got booed out of the building at the WWE Raw debut on Netflix, and I've had so many people reach out to me and say, Brando, when are you going to talk about this? And there's no way that I could let it go by and not talk about it, because those of you that have watched my channel for any amount of time knows that I've been a wrestling fan my entire life, and I've drawn a lot of comparisons between MAGA and the WWE. To me, Donald Trump absolutely stole the WWE format and used it in the political arena. And so there's no way that I could watch Hulk Hogan get booed out of the room and not talk about it. Wrestling is something I've always watched. I don't ever remember being introduced to it. It was just always playing in my house. And I have never been a Hulkamaniac for 1 minute. I was rooting against him at WrestleMania 1. I was pulling for Piper. I was pulling for King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 2. I was pulling for Andre at WrestleMania 3. I think the only time that I cheered for Hogan was when he fought Sergeant Slaughter at WrestleMania 7. That's when Sergeant Slaughter was doing the stupid Iraqi sympathizer gimmick. And so, being a kid and watching that, you had to kind of pull for Hulk in that one. But every other time, I never got into the dude. I didn't even like him in the NWO when he turned heel. I liked Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, thought they were great, but I hated the fact that he was the leader of that group. I've just never enjoyed Hulk Hogan's presentation at all. And I always enjoyed Bobby the Brain Heenan's color commentary when he would always be back in the 80s accusing Hogan of being a grifter and a con man and a liar and a cheat. And I know all that stuff was done in character, but later on, everything the Brain said in character actually came out to be true about Hogan, and we're going to talk more about that later. But I did watch the very first episode of Monday Night Raw on cable TV back in 1993, so I absolutely had to watch it when they moved over to Netflix. And me and my son Emmett, who's 12, he's a big fan. We tuned in to watch. And I've had a lot of people say, so Brando, what you think of the show? And I will just say this. I've been a fan my entire life. That bored me to tears. I did think that the presentation was pretty cool. They had a lot of new camera angles. They had some drones flying around doing some camera work. It was pretty cool. I'm a big fan of Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa. I thought they had a good match, although the ending was kind of overbooked and ridiculous. I thought The Rock had way too much camera time. I really don't care one way or the other about John Cena. I'm a big fan of Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, so I stuck around and watched that match. But we're like an hour and 40 minutes into a show, and there's only been 2 matches. And it was a ton of commercials and a ton of breaks and a ton of people talking. And that's just not me. I don't get into that kind of thing. And besides, the main event was CM Punk and Seth Rollins. And folks, I would rather watch paint dry as to watch either one of those. If you're a wrestling fan, can someone please explain to me the appeal of CM Punk and Seth Rollins? Because I think Punk is horrible all the way around. Rollins is a good athlete. He's a better wrestler than Punk is. But to put him in the same vein as a Bret Hart or a Shawn Michaels is laughable at best. So I was not going to stick around and watch that. So the bad news is I tuned out because I had heard that Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't going to be there. And I was like, well, if Austin ain't coming, I'm just tuning this out because I don't want to watch CM Punk. This is not my cup of tea. So I tuned out, and I missed getting to see Hogan booed in real time. I woke up the next morning. The internet was an absolute blaze with him being booed out of the room. Now, I can't show you any of the clips because the WWE is very strict on their content and they will strike me for doing it. There's a lot of creators who simply reacts to WWE. They're big fans of WWE and they react to it. A lot of those people have had their videos taken down or their channels banned, so I don't want to run that risk. If you want to see him get booed, it's not hard to find. It was absolutely priceless. He came out to his theme song, I'm a Real American. He was wearing his Real American beer shirt. And he had his longtime manager, Jimmy Hart, waving a big, gigantic American flag. Now, I like Jimmy Hart. But no matter how much Jimmy Hart waved that flag and tried to dance around, he could not get Hulk over. And the crowd in LA was not buying it at all and just booed the guy out of the room. And I've seen so many people saying, did Hogan deserve this reaction? Yes, he deserved that and then some. As someone who's never liked him, I really thoroughly enjoyed seeing it. And had I known that that was going to happen, I definitely would not have tuned out. I would have loved to see it in real time. I promise you, I would have been laid over in my recliner, horse laughing at that. I was anyway. But the thing about Hulk Hogan that those of you that don't watch wrestling, or those of you that may hate pro wrestling, whatever the case may be, you saw him come out at the RNC and you saw him make his ridiculous speech. You saw him rip the shirt off, and I'm sure you were saying, that is the stupidest shit that I've ever seen in my life. Well, that's what we've been watching now for over 30 years. We've been watching that same tired act. What he did at the RNC was one of his basic promos that he would cut on his opponents. And I never enjoyed it in the wrestling world, and I sure as hell didn't like seeing it come over into the politics. if you really look into Hulk Hogan's past, he is not the role model that he pretended to be on TV. He's not the good guy that he pretended to be on TV. If you go listen to Jesse Ventura, Ventura talks about how that Jesse Ventura was trying to get a wrestlers union started. He thought that the wrestlers needed a union because they didn't have health care, they didn't have pensions, they had nothing. Vince McMahon treated pro wrestlers back in the day as like individual contractors, which was BS because they were working for his company and had to abide by his rules, but yet he treated them as independent contractors, and he could just hire and fire them whenever he wanted to, and they got nothing out of it. And so Ventura was trying to get a union started, and Hulk Hogan went and ratted Ventura out to McMahon and got that shut down. He also, not too long ago, there was some tapes came out of him saying some very racist things, and there was some people who tried to write that off and give him a pass and say, well, he was angry at the time or whatever. I even saw some black wrestlers come to his defense and say that they knew him and never saw that side of him. But then more came out that was pretty hard for anyone to turn away from or anyone to give a pass for. And so it just continued to get worse. And then if you really want to be entertained, go out there and look up Jim Cornette, who's one of my favorites, and he's politically aligned with us. But Jim Cornette did a video where he broke down all of the lies that Hulk Hogan has told over the years. It's getting crazier by the minute. He goes out there now, folks, and just absolutely lies his ass off, puts himself in places he never was. He claims he was there when the wrestler Bruiser Brody got stabbed in Puerto Rico. That's not true. It's easily debunked. He claims that he was Elvis's favorite wrestler, and that Elvis used to send him flowers and roses when he wrestled in Memphis. The only problem with that is Hulk Hogan debuted in Florida in July of '77. He didn't make it to Memphis till the following summer. So in the summer of '78, Elvis was no longer here. The wrestler that Elvis did send roses to was Jerry the King Lawler, but he just sort of injects himself into the story. He claims that he played baseball for the Cincinnati Reds. That wasn't him. That was the Macho Man. He claims that he got asked to play bass for the Rolling Stones, which he did start off as a bass player, but he says that Metallica and the Stones and all these people tried to take him on, claims that he got the grill before George Foreman. I mean, and just puts himself in all types of scenarios that he was never involved in. So if you're sitting here listening to this, you're probably already thinking this. That is exactly why he fit in so well with MAGA. Because the guy has always been a grifter. He's always been a con man. He's always been a liar. He's always tried to dodge any and all accountability. So really, when you look at it, that is where people land. If you're that type of person, you've got a home in MAGA, because you can go there and then write off any mistake you've ever made, any racist comments you've ever made, any lie you've ever told. You can immediately flip the script and say it's all just the liberals spewing fake news, and you've got to pass. And so I'm not at all shocked that Hulk Hogan would suddenly be out there championing Donald Trump and pushing his politics, because that's the type of person that Hulk Hogan has always been. And I really believe that a lot of times in pro wrestling, what happens is sometimes the character and the real person, they sort of eventually mesh together and come together. And the whole Hollywood Hogan gimmick that he did in the 90s, I think that was probably truer to how he really was as a person. Someone who just walked all over top of anyone and did whatever he wanted to do with no accountability whatsoever. But I'm seeing a lot of reaction from people on the right saying, well, it was because they were in L.A. and it was a woke crowd that was pissed at him. And I would argue that's not the case at all, because The Undertaker came out, rode his bike around the arena, and when the gong went off, the crowd erupted for The Undertaker. They cheered for him, and The Undertaker had Trump on his podcast, which was very disappointing to me. But to my knowledge, I've never been made aware of The Undertaker being racist or The Undertaker being anything else. I've never, heard any sort of comments like that he's made. I was very disappointed he had Trump on and platformed a guy like that. But The Undertaker's always been one of my favorite characters in wrestling. He's always been on my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers as far as a character goes. He's probably the greatest character they ever had. He got cheered loudly. I mean, the crowd popped big time for him. They didn't pop for Hogan because they're just sick of Hogan. They've seen through Hogan for years. A lot of them also, like me, was really looking forward to seeing Stone Cold, and when they realized Stone Cold wasn't going to be there, the last thing they wanted to see was Hogan. And Hulk Hogan's style of promo and his style of wrestling is dated. People don't want to see that anymore. It's just not something, even if you took all the other stuff off the shelf, it's still a style that no one cares about and wants to see. And Bret Hart said it best. The wrestlers today, they try to imitate Bret Hart. They don't try to imitate Hulk Hogan. No one's out there trying to do that gimmick because it was a very 80s style gimmick. He was able to milk it some in the 90s with the NWO, but that real American patriotic, I'm going to beat the Iron Sheik gimmick, it's old and it's dated and no one cares. And we all were thinking of the Iron Sheik, who hated Hulk Hogan for real. And every time he had an opportunity to say, fuck that jabroni, he did. And so I'm sure if there's a heaven, the Iron Sheik was looking down laughing at that and finally, got one up on Hogan. I've never been a fan. I'm never going to be a fan. And I'm especially not going to be a fan now that he's out there selling his crappy American beer and pushing Donald Trump's politics. It's disappointing enough to see other people like The Undertaker do it. That's disappointing. But Hogan has always been this way. And people have finally just grown tired of it and they see through it. So I really believe that more than anything, that's what it was. It was just people really starting to see through him and saying, I don't want to be involved in that anymore. And so to someone like me who rooted against him every step of the way, I'm laughing about it. I'm not going to lie. I had a good laugh, and I wished I hadn't tuned out. It's CM Punk's fault that I did. Please, someone explain to me what's so great about that dude. He's horrible. Anyway, never liked the dude. I actually enjoyed seeing him get whooped in UFC. Just never could get into his stuff. But anyway, maybe the greatest guy ever. And he may not be nowhere near the prick that Hogan is, but that's another story. That's for a whole other... You'll have to join me over on Patreon for some of my non-political content, and maybe I'll do an entire video of why I don't like CM Punk and Seth Rollins. I'm a big time... I love Gunther. If you watch wrestling these days, Gunther's one of my favorites. I really love Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman, of course. Randy Orton still got it. But there's not a whole lot. I do like the White Six. I was a big Bray Wyatt fan, and I'm glad to see his younger brother carrying that on. But other than that, I won't march into my driveway for the rest of it. And so, but if I hear Hogan's coming back, I'm going to tune in to see if he gets booed again. And so, I really appreciate you guys for supporting what it is I do here on the channel, and we'll just keep pushing forward. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff we're going to have to cover that's not going to give us a laugh, so if we have a moment to laugh, we'll laugh, and laughing at Hulk Hogan's expense, that sounds great to me. So here's to the Iron Sheik, and fuck that jabroni Hulk Hogan.